Have you ever worried about sounding rude when speaking English, especially when you want to disagree with something that somebody has just said? You know that moment when you don't agree with somebody, when somebody said something, well, let's be totally honest, you think that something they've said is absolute rubbish, but you're not sure how to say it politely. Well, by the end of this video, you'll learn how to disagree politely with somebody here in the UK. And I've helped thousands of people just like you over nearly 15 years of being an English teacher. So maybe in your language, you'd be direct when you disagree. You're clear, you're straight to the point. But here in the UK, it is different. There's a certain kind of dance to disagreement, a rhythm. And if you miss it, things can get pretty awkward pretty quickly. And if you've ever stayed quiet just to avoid making things weird, well, this video is for you. It's not just about grammar or vocabulary. This is about expressing your real personality, your opinions, your boundaries in a way that feels, natural and respectful here in the UK. Because you shouldn't have to choose between being polite and being honest, being yourself. You can have both. Hello, you wonderful people. Welcome to English Right Now. My name is Roy, your British English teacher. I was raised and I was born here in the UK. And over the years, I have helped thousands of students from around the world, just like you. And I've helped them to feel more confident speaking English in real life. But the real transformation, it's not just about better sentences. It's about understanding the culture and feeling like, you finally feel at home here. So let me know in the comments below if you've ever had any issues like this or other issues that you would like me to help you with. So before we get on to some examples, let's talk about 3 key strategies for disagreeing with somebody politely. So the first one is to acknowledge and show that the other person's opinion matters and that you understand what that person is trying to say. The first strategy that is key to disagreeing politely is about acknowledging their point. Even if you think it's rubbish, even if you don't agree, you show that you acknowledge that their opinion matters. The second key strategy that we use is often expressing a sense of neutrality, or like we're not even certain that what they say is wrong and what I'm saying is right. It's this kind of idea of balance. So we have this idea of expressing balance, neutrality and uncertainty when it comes to disagreeing with somebody. Like, instead of saying you're wrong, which is pretty direct and could cause conflict and be seen as very rude, you could say, I'm not quite sure you're right. And the third way that we often use when disagreeing with somebody politely is just apologizing. We say sorry. Now, I've done a whole lesson on the word sorry and how we use it when we don't actually mean sorry. We're actually just saying other things, and apologizing before you disagree with somebody is a classic kind of technique to disagree politely. Probably because you're saying, I'm really sorry, but I think you're wrong. I don't want to offend you. This kind of idea. And often we use 1 or 2 or even 3, like a combination of these 3 strategies in one sentence. But now what we're going to look at is some classic examples. Now, before we get to a couple of examples of each one of these strategies, let's look at 5 kind of gentle ways to disagree in British English without sounding rude. These are things that I often say myself because we don't always agree with people. Somebody thinks that this football team is the best in the world and I don't agree, or somebody thinks that this film is rubbish and I think it's brilliant. Saying you are wrong is too blunt and too rude for British culture. We've talked a lot on this channel about British culture. I did a whole lesson on sort of the idea of negative politeness and how important that is. You can check that out. I'll put a link down below in the description. But there's a whole song and dance when it comes to British culture. And now we're going to talk about 5 ways that you could disagree politely in conversations, maybe at work, or even with friends. So the first one that I commonly use is, I see what you mean, but. Now this one, it sort of acknowledges that opinion. It's the first sort of real kind of acknowledgement. And it shows that you've listened. I see what you mean. I see, I understand. See here means understand. I see what you mean, but. This word but is often quite a dangerous word, I find. Nothing good often comes after but. I joke about this with my friend, sort of thing like, Oh, yeah, no, I see what you mean, but you're wrong. But we don't say it like that. You're not rejecting that person's opinion. You're gently offering another view. So I see what you mean, but I think, in my opinion, this is the way I see it. And then we go into it like this. So somebody says the film's a bit rubbish. Well, I see what you mean, but to be honest, I quite liked the writing and the storytelling. So you're introducing a gentle view. The second one is also validating that person's point, and you say, wow, that's an interesting point. I hadn't thought of it like that. Though personally, so notice there, I'm saying, wow, that's a really interesting opinion. Interesting can be quite a dangerous word in British English if you understand the culture. But that's an interesting point, and I hadn't thought of it like that. So you're basically saying, wow, you've opened my eyes to a new way of thinking, even if you're not. And it's like this kind of song and dance. Even if you're not really considering their opinion, you're making it sound like you do. This one works beautifully when you want to soften the transition to your own opinion. So that's an interesting point, though personally. And then we express our own opinion. Number 3 is, I can understand why you'd say that. My experience has been a bit different. This is really diplomatic, and it gives space for both truths, both being true. This is typically British, to be honest. So I can understand why you'd say that. You're not wrong, but my experience has been a bit different. So you're kind of sort of saying that, yes, I can see why you would think that, but this is why I think something else. So we're talking here about experiences. I'm not invalidating that person's opinion. I'm not saying they're wrong. I'm just saying that this isn't the way that I see the situation. It's really diplomatic. And a lot of these are about avoiding conflict. British people in general, British culture, we tend to be quite conflict averse. We don't like confrontation, particularly in social settings. We'd sooner just kind of not create a kind of negative atmosphere in terms of you're wrong, I'm right, this is an argument. Instead, if we say, well, you could be right, but I think this could be right as well, it gives the person the opinion or the opportunity to go, oh, yeah, maybe. And again, it's this idea of saving face that's so important in British culture. You're not embarrassing that other person by saying they're wrong. You're giving them the opportunity to see or understand your opinion as well. Number 4 is probably slightly more formal and saying something like, I'm really sorry, do you mind if I offer another perspective? Perspective is quite formal. Maybe instead you'd say, another point of view. So this turns this kind of conversation, a disagreement, into more of a conversation. It's more collaborative. It's not confrontational. So by saying like, oh, sorry, do you mind if I offer another point of view? You're basically saying, do you mind if I give my opinion to see if you disagree or agree with me? You're kind of entering the conversation and bringing it up for debate rather than saying you're wrong, this is right. So again, it's all about this idea of neutrality and sort of being quite sitting, almost appearing like we're sitting on the fence. Sitting on the fence is a really classic idiom, which basically means you're not basically siding with one opinion. So if you sit on the fence, it's this idea of neutrality. Number 5, before we get onto those examples of each of the strategies, is I'm not sure I'd go that far, to be honest. So I'm not sure gives that element of uncertainty and neutrality. And this idea of going that far means that I may agree with you to a certain point, but you've maybe gone a bit further than I would go. And this one is, I would say this one's slightly cheeky, but it's still soft and it lets you get your voice or your opinion over. So the thing is about those 5, notice how all 5 of them avoid the sharp kind of you're wrong. They make room for disagreement, and they also give an element, they almost give the kind of, they make room or a room to say that I might not be right. I don't agree with you, but you might not be wrong and I might not be right as well. So it's avoiding directly accusing somebody of being wrong. It's the same way across British culture that we don't tend to directly accuse people. If, for example, you go to a shop and somebody accidentally overcharges you, you don't say, you overcharged me, you're stealing my money. That's far too direct. You may say something instead like, I'm really sorry, I think there may be a problem with the machine because there seems to be, it seems to be slightly more expensive than it should be. So you're kind of blaming a third party, in this case, a machine, rather than directly attacking the person. Now, this is all about negative politeness and about saving negative face. So, this is such an important part of British culture. I talk a lot about it on my brand new course, What the British Say versus What We Actually Mean. This is looking at living in the UK, British culture, life here, things like this. It's not just about the words we say, it's about the actual way we say things rather than kind of saying you stole my money to the person in the shop. You're saying I think the machine might be broken. There's a whole reason for it. It relates strongly in this case to negative politeness. If you want to learn more about my new course, check it out in the link below in the comments, and I hope you have fun. If you have any questions about it, let me know. But it's all about keeping the tone, in terms of disagreeing politely, it's all about keeping the tone respectful, open, and friendly. There's a lot of different examples. Those 5 aren't just the only kind of examples we've got. There's a lot of different ways to say the same thing, but this gives you a core idea. And now let's talk about 2 examples for each of the 3 kind of strategies. So we talked about acknowledgement and understanding, showing understanding. So for these, you could say something like, I completely see what you're saying. I completely see what you're saying. However, and therefore you introduce your opinion. So first of all, you are acknowledging their opinion, saying, wow, I completely understand what you're saying. That shows your understanding. However, in my opinion, etc., etc., etc. Another good way of showing acknowledgement and understanding is, that's a really good suggestion. Words like really strengthen it even more. Even if we completely think what you've said is absolute rubbish, saying, oh, that's a really good suggestion. So here I would say, oh, that's a really good suggestion. The thing is, it basically introduces a kind of opposite opinion. At this moment, so you're talking more about the current time rather than it's wrong. Their opinion is wrong. It's just not suitable for this moment. I feel. So that's a good suggestion. The thing is, at this moment, I feel that another strategy may be slightly better. Slightly as well. It reduces the impact. It's all about minimizing the impact. Slightly better. Not massively better. Not you're completely wrong. You're slightly wrong, and my opinion is slightly better. These words absolutely add a lot, and it's all about negative politeness again. Now, if we want to express neutrality or uncertainty, we can say things like, I'm not sure I quite agree with you on this. So, for example, I'm not sure shows that it's not you're wrong, it's that I'm not 100%. Even if we are 100%, we say we're not 100% because we want to show an element of uncertainty. And I'm not sure I quite agree. So quite here lowers it again. There is no such thing as quite agree, technically. You either agree or you disagree. But we commonly say, I'm not sure I quite agree. I find this quite funny. I find this really quite amusing, actually, because people say, oh, I'm not sure I quite agree. Again, it is black and white in this. You either agree or disagree, but linguistically, we use these words to soften the impact. Another way of expressing neutrality or uncertainty is saying things like, I might be wrong. So you introduce this idea that, there's 100% you could be wrong. It's not 100% certain that I'm right. I might be wrong, but the way I understood it is. Now, honestly, culturally, we commonly say these things when we are 100% sure we're right. But we say things like, I might be wrong, but the way I understood it is this. And this kind of gives that person the option to save face by saying, oh my goodness, I think you might be right. However, if they argue their point, they may lose face. So it's all about negative face, reputational damage, these kind of things, when we think about sort of the way in which we disagree politely. And finally, talking about apologizing and disagreeing, but apologizing before we disagree, you could say something like, I'm sorry, I don't quite agree. I'm sorry, I don't quite agree. Again, that quite word just adds that little bit more uncertainty, a little bit more hedging to it. I'm sorry. So you're apologizing for not agreeing. I've done a whole lesson on apologizing, as I said. It's a massive part of British culture, and people find us quite funny that we apologize all the time. But honestly, when we say sorry, it's not always apologizing. So I'm sorry, I don't quite agree. This is like, I don't mean to inconvenience you with my disagreement, but, and again, that word quite adds a lot. And an alternative to this would be, I'm really sorry. Again, strengthen it with really sorry. I'm afraid. So you're double apologizing because sometimes we use the word I'm afraid not, or I'm afraid so, to apologize. Afraid can mean scared, but we also use it to apologize. I'm really sorry. I'm afraid I have to disagree with you on one or two things, or I have to disagree with one or two things. So here we're saying, I'm sorry, I'm sorry. I have to disagree. So there's almost like this kind of obligation on us to disagree with you. That's the way we're putting it. So we're distancing ourselves. So if I said, I'm sorry, I disagree, quite straight, quite direct, but I'm really sorry. I'm afraid I have to disagree with one or two things. This is basically saying, um, kind of, and it sounds literally that you're saying that, I really feel obliged to disagree with one or two things. We might disagree with all of it, but by saying one or two things, it minimizes the impact. So there you go. There's a few little turns of phrase for you there. These are not just words, though. They're part of a cultural code. They're part of the UK's cultural code. Every country or every culture has their own little cultural codes, the unwritten rules that no one really teaches you in a language class. And in the UK, a lot of my students ask me about British culture and things like this. And the thing is, these cultural codes are everywhere. And once you understand them, it's like something kind of clicks. You stop second guessing yourself. You stop panicking about being rude because you know how to execute your disagreements or express your opinion politely. You start to speak more freely. You feel like, well, you again, just in British English in this case. And that is exactly why, as I say, I created that course, What the British Say versus What We Actually Mean. It's not about being perfect. It's more about feeling like you get it. And one reason that I created this course is because, for example, my wife is from Brazil. She moved here, and there were some things that I passed on to her. Not only did I help thousands of students with questions like this in the classroom, but also my wife had a lot of questions as well that I realized that I wish there was a kind of guide to help people like you who are either traveling, visiting, or moving to the UK, or even living here now. And that's why I created this guide. So if this video helped you, please do subscribe for more real life British English that you won't find just in any old textbook. And check out the course link in the description and in the comments if you are ready to go deeper. And before I go, I just want to say, remember, you are not behind, you're not doing things wrong. You're just learning how to kind of navigate new cultures and speak and show your true personality in this new kind of rhythm. And honestly, you are doing better than you think. I promise you that. Thank you very much for watching this lesson. I hope to see you next time and have a great day. Bye.